We have to recapture the extent to which anti-Irish feeling and to some degree other ethnic slurs were really racial. People talked about the Irish as a race. The feelings were very akin to what we call racism today.
After the City Hall debates, New York principals were ordered to search through textbooks for passages offensive to Catholics, which they painstakingly removed by hand. 2 years later, the Public School Society was replaced by the New York City Board of Education, an elected body. Growing numbers of Catholic children enrolled. The issue of religion took its place alongside other crucial issues facing the architects of public education, most notably the issue of race.
The black place represents Africa. The people are black. They are also very ignorant of books and learning and destitute of true religion. For many centuries, it has been the practice of other nations to use them as slaves. Millions of them have been brought to America.
In the years just prior to the Civil War, 2/3 of African Americans lived in the South, most of them as slaves. There, efforts to become educated were harshly punished. In the North, going to school was not a crime, but many blacks were forced into schools that were segregated and poorly funded.
It became clear to most of them that a better education did not mean a better position in society or a better job because of their race. And therefore, it always raised the question for them, education for what? And I think the answer for African Americans was that they began to tie the quest for freedom and the quest for education and excellence together. And so they began to think of education as part of a freedom struggle.
In the 1840s, black school children in Boston were still restricted to 2 primary schools, both segregated. Parents and reformers gathered at the African Meeting House to debate strategies for protest. They were encouraged by an escaped slave and noted abolitionist named Frederick Douglass.
The point we must aim at is to obtain admission for our children into the nearest schoolhouse and the best schoolhouse in their own neighborhoods.
In the winter of 1846, a group of nearly 90 African Americans drew up a petition to the Boston School Committee. In response, the school committee investigated the state of the black schools. They found the largest, the Smith School, in dangerous need of repair. Despite the report, no action was taken. Soon afterwards, 5-year-old Sarah Roberts was assigned to the Smith School. Her father, Benjamin Roberts, made a bold move. He tried to enroll Sarah in a better school closer to home. Her application was denied because of her race. Roberts then tried the other 4 schools that Sarah would pass on her walk to the Smith School. At each, she was refused admission. Once, she was physically ejected by a teacher. Members of the school committee defended segregation, claiming that it was maintained for the special benefit of colored children.
In the case of colored children, we maintain that their peculiar physical, mental, and moral structure requires an educational treatment different from that of white children.
Outraged, Roberts vowed to sue the city of Boston, naming his daughter Sarah as plaintiff. By 1849, the case reached the Massachusetts State Supreme Court. Representing Roberts in court were Robert Morris, one of the nation's first African-American lawyers, and abolitionist lawyer Charles Sumner.
The school is the little world in which the child is trained for the larger world of life, beginning there those relations of equality which the Constitution and the laws promise to all. I conclude that there is but one kind of public school, free to all, whether rich or poor, whether Catholic or Protestant, whether white or black, excluding none, comprehending all.
Chief Justice Lemuel Shaw ruled against Sarah Roberts. Undeterred, Roberts and a group of supporters called the Negro School Abolition Society took their cause to the state legislature. In 1855, a law was passed abolishing segregation in the schools of Massachusetts. It was the first such law in the nation.
Roberts, they were the dreamers. They were the ones who believed in America that was hard to imagine, an America without race discrimination, America in which all people, irrespective of race, creed, or color, would have equal access to public institutions, public places. They were dreamers.
The American Civil War ended in 1865. 4 million Americans, formerly slaves, were now free to become literate.
Reconstruction was, as Booker T. Washington described it, an entire race trying to go to school. There wasn't anybody too old or too young that didn't feel as though he or she couldn't benefit from some level of schooling. And it was seen as the most valuable undertaking, the notion of going to school.
The Western states. The greater part of these states now contain a vast number of white inhabitants, and thousands of people are every year emigrating to this land of plenty.
After the Civil War, the Congress actually required states to guarantee in their constitution that they would offer a free, non-sectarian education to all children.
In this vast territory, with new schools cropping up everywhere, a crisis arose. Who would teach the children? Advocate Catherine Beecher promoted female teachers as a civilizing force in the West. A member of a prominent New England family and sister of author Harriet Beecher Stowe, Catherine Beecher saw teaching as a woman's moral calling. Women teachers gave children on the remote frontier an introduction to literature, standards of behavior, and national ideals.
The idea was that while the students learned how to read, they would learn the morality that would be this common morality of society. And that is the idea that you should work hard and acquire wealth. Then you're blessed by God.
By 1890, the U.S. was providing more schooling to more children than any other nation on earth, thanks in large part to the 19th century movement for school reform.
The result, of course, is free, tax-supported education. That's not a small matter, and I think it mattered in kids' lives. But there was all kinds of discrimination in the system, and so to say it was progress is not to deny all the failings.
While a majority of American children attended public school, they didn't all go to school together. Many Native Americans were sent to special government schools, where they were forced to abandon tribal languages, customs, and dress. African Americans also faced exclusion, and some created their own schools. Black literacy soared from 5% to 70% in the decades after the Civil War. The great American experiment of universal education was well underway.